No sound. All right, all right, all right. Hello, hello. My name is Tobias. I'm going to tell you about building really fast applications. And who here is a developer? Can you please do a show of hands? Oh, okay. Big majority of the room. Okay, who here is doing PHP? Still a lot. All right, cool, 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 cool. So I want to talk to you about building fast applications. And I want to do this because knowing about how to build fast applications also makes sure you know about your code, how it actually works. But short about me, I'm trying to do cool things at Eneba.com, basically buying video games online. I'm also doing a lot of Symfony stuff. Symfony is a very big PHP framework. I'm a core member, I'm a care member, and I'm running PHP meetup groups in Stockholm. I also do a lot of open source. I started my open source career in 2015 on a conference just like this one. Me and my friends were like, hey, let's build a cache library because this cache standard just came out. And this quickly exploded to basically everything. I think I'm the most downloaded PHP maintainer. And like we have hundreds of millions download every month for these packages and everything else. However, we're not going to talk about open source. Back when Twitter was hot, I saw this on Twitter like a lot of times. Frameworks are slow. It's a little bit provocative, right? And who here is using a framework? Again, show of hands. This is the interaction talk. All right. What is a framework? Someone said Symfony, sure. Symfony is, but what is a framework? What defines a framework? Like back in the days, like 15 years ago, a framework was basically every file, every class you can think about, we put it in a nice package, you download the zip file, and that's your framework. But nowadays, what is a framework? Like cool modern framework like Symfony 7 or Send Expressive, they're just a bunch of rules and guidelines, and they basically has nothing in it when you download it, right? So when people say like this, frameworks are slow, what do they mean? Let's dig into this more. Like I want to talk about performance. If something is slow, it means bad performance. So what is performance? There are three important rules about performance. First rule is buy a better server. This is by far the cheapest way to get better performance. Because hardware is cheaper than developers, right? Rule number 2, use Varnish. Use cache. Most people do this. It's super cool. And the idea is to let Varnish handle 95% of your traffic, and everything is super fast. This is not that kind of talk. If you don't know about Varnish, like Google it. There's a lot of talks, books, and conferences about Varnish. Everybody uses this. It's great. But I want to talk about rule number 3. I want to talk about run less code. This is what I want to focus about on this talk. Does anybody know what this is? I mean, I've been doing a lot of talks, I've been doing a lot of conferences, and if you've seen me before, you know I love interaction. So I love like raising your hand, like shouting out things, or maybe you do a little bit of sometime, if you feel like it. So again, what is this? Assembler, yes, very good, thank you. So this is basically running echo hello world in PHP. And so the idea is your code will eventually be compiled down to machine code, and this is what runs on your CPU. So if you have a 3 gigahertz CPU, that means you can run 3 billion of these lines every second. So the fewer lines you have, the faster it will go, right? The idea is 1 line, 1 tick, more code, more ticks, less ticks, faster. You get it. So if you want to build the fastest application you can do, you should do something like this. This should be your full application. Because you know, this has fewer ticks, it will be running super quick, and there will be nothing faster than this. So your problem now is really, how can you make your application looking more like this? And of course, if your business problem was, write welcome to index, you'll be done, but your business problem is not that. So we need to do something better. So we need to figure out first, what is your application doing? Back in the days, I wrote an application like this. This is you have a short URL, and then you want to you have a long URL, and you want to create a short one, and this is the redirect application. And as you can see, I don't do anything fancy. And I think all of us can agree, if I want to use a framework or anything bigger than this, it will definitely be overkill. You can still argue that using PHP for this is overkill. If I was better at Nginx, I would have written this in Nginx instead of PHP. So we need to figure out, what is our application doing? Is it like all the way over here with my redirect application? Or is it by something generic from Symfony skeleton? Or is it way, way, way over here, a service with forms and HTML and stuff? So where on this complexity scale is your application? And again, to figure this out, let's play a game of, do you need this? So my idea is, do you need security? If you're on a private network, do a microservice on a private network, do you need security? And do you need forms? If you have a microservice, do you need HTML and forms? If you only have a few routes, do you need a router? Like the Symfony router is the fastest router there is, but it's still slower than no router, right? So if you have like, if this is that, that's the best router, right? Do you need a kernel if you have a small code base? I love dependency injection, just like the next guy. But if you only have 10 classes, do you need it? Also, do you need classes? So try to remove as much as you can. Do you need HTTP? Like, if you have a service using CLI only, cool, then don't use HTTP. And if you use HTTP, do you need like HTTP foundations, or are you happy with superglobals? You should know, as a web developer, that it's basically impossible to get the user IP in a reliable way. And that's why libraries like HTTP Foundation exists. But maybe your application don't care about the user IP. Like, if you don't need it, don't use it. Another perfect microservice is reading from a queue and putting things in database. And there's an excellent messenger component you can use. That, of course, includes a lot of abstractions, a lot of nice APIs you can work with. But the messenger component will be slower than using AMQP extension directly, right? Good. Same thing with Doctrine. Like, do you want to use this fancy library to talk with the database, or you're happy with the raw implementation from the PDO? Like, Doctrine is nice, but if you have like 3 queries in your microservice, just Google how to write those queries with the PDO and you'll be fine. So for me, it's a balance. You can either stand on, I gotta make sure, on this side, saying, I want to use well-tested libraries. I want to make sure I take care of all the edge cases. I want to have nice APIs to work with. I will develop super quickly, but they will be executing the code slowly. Or should it be all the way over here when I write all the code myself? I take care of my edge cases, and I work with tricky APIs like the PDO, AMQP, etc. This will take me a longer time to develop because, yeah, you know, but it will be less code. And even though, I want to say, even though you think that, hey, I know the PDO, I know the AMQP, I know how to develop this code, like, you are a good engineer, right? But think about your team. Your team sucks. So you need to make sure that this can be maintained by the full team. So for me, when starting new or adding new dependencies, I want you to consider this balance. I want you to figure out where you should be. And now I want to build a small application with you. I'm gonna show you something that that is not really, how would I put it properly? So I want to challenge you. When you get started with a new task, you task to build a new microservice. I want you to build something new. And what I want to show you now, like, pay attention in the next 5 minutes, you'll be cool. But if you want to go back and figure out what did this crazy Swedish guy actually say, I have published this on GitHub. So it's not a new framework, it's not a new code, it's more for educational purposes to figure out what should we be doing. And I decide, new application, I'm going to build it. I want to use the middleware pattern because it's simple, it scales fine until some point, and if it gets too complicated, you can easily switch to some better pattern. So, new application, new index.php file. I decided, the tech people, can you please make sure I see the top of my slides? Or maybe I do. We'll play along to see what it goes. So I started my new index.php file. I decided I want to use the Symfony HTTP Foundation. I create a new request and new response, and all the way at the bottom, I'll print it. So it will look something like this. Not super exciting yet. So let's add some content to here. So first thing I do, I add my first middleware. This is just an anonymous function. I take a request, a response, and the next callable middleware. And here I just check if it's not a GET request, then, like, if it's not a GET request, say 405. But if it is a GET request, just continue with the next one. And my next middleware is something like this. It's just add some content. And when I have my two middlewares, I add some magic. I put them into a middleware runner, then I run the runner and print the results. And it looks like this. And then I run the runner and I print the result, and it looks like this. All right, thank you. So the magic is, of course, in the runner. What does this runner do? It just takes a list of middlewares, and the runner itself is an invocable. So it says, takes the first middleware, and then it makes sure to execute this. And then the third argument is this. So when the middleware is done, it just runs this invoke method over and over. And you may think, I don't like anonymous functions. Just slap an interface on it, and you'll be fine. So with this application, or with this technique, I can build an application looking like this. This is a geocoder I built. It has a cache, it has a New Relic, some security, and then a router. And of course, this is the full application with pretty much only my code I built. And the magic is here is in the router. The router, I implemented something like this. I just say, if it's / then use this controller. If it's / from IP, use that controller, etc., etc. So now I feel pretty good about myself because everything works. I'm very much in control. It's mostly my code. I know that it's not a lot of code, so this will be very, very fast application. But then I started thinking, maybe with the cache here, it gets really hard to develop. It's like if I develop a controller, I have the cache here in the way, like if the response are caches, I don't really see the changes. So what if I could have a different configuration between local and production? So I think a little bit, and I decided to create something like a custom kernel. So I put all of this thing in a kernel, and I say, here is my kernel. I can construct it with an environment, and if I'm debugging or not. And then here, my handle method, I just add the code we've seen before, but instead of just instantiating the cache, I use the dependency injection, because I'm an adult now, I have dependency injection. Add my middlewares, and then I run there, and then I run the middlewares. And to start up the kernel, I need to have a boot method. And what the boot method is doing, it checks, do I have a built kernel cached already? If I don't, then let's create a kernel builder. I add a few parameters to it, and I add a file loader to load some good YAML code, and then I compile it, and here at the very end, I just save it for later. So with all this, I can create configuration looking like this. So I can define with proper YAML, I can say, if in development, don't use cache. If it's production, then please use cache, etc. So I feel like I'm building something cool, I feel like I'm building something real, and I want to add more things. I want to add, if there's an event subscriber, like add this tag to it so I can handle it properly later. Or if I write a CLI command and there's this other tag to it. And at some point, you're like, Tobias, I understood your first few slides, but now it's a little bit too complicated, it's a little bit too much. And that's fair. At some point you will feel like this, or your team will feel like this. So this is the point you actually grew out of your thing you built yourself and use a proper framework. And an early version of Symfony framework, which is the best framework in PHP you can possibly think, is basically this. So we built the first version of Symfony altogether. It's not so much more complicated than this. It's just a bunch of boilerplate. So my idea is start from nothing, and then when you grow out of it, if you grow out of it, then you can switch to something more profound. But I also realize not all of us have the luxury to starting from new. Most of us sitting and just working on an old application, and we're trying to do our best. So how do we improve performance in existing applications? So Yeah, how do we make existing applications run faster? And you know the rules, like this is still true, and they go from cheap to expensive, and more generically, like buy a better computer, use cache, run less code. So now we'll go into the practical hands-on thing on my talk. Now I'm gonna try to give you a lot of tips, I'm gonna try to give you a lot of tricks. Of course, my example is very much PHP, but this is also generic. You can apply them most places, but you cannot copy the slides. Speaking about the slides, I will share them after. I will go through this very quickly. So if you know something, then there's a minute to the next one, and I'll share the slides later so you can dig into this if you want to. So, are you ready? I appreciate the enthusiasm. All right. Tip number 1 is, of course, this is AWS. The most expensive computer is at the bottom. Buy that one and you'll be fine. Tip number 2, using cache. So in cache you have a lot of different ways of caching, but what you should always do, you should set up a cache chain. You should first go look at your own memory, use that cache. If that's a cache miss, then you should go to something like APCU, or then you can go all the way to Redis. Redis is fast, but it's not faster than your own local memory. So if you find it in Redis, then you populate all the other caches. So configure a cache chain like this, and then you will have way better cache lookup times. Same thing with Doctrine to fetch things from the database. If you're using Doctrine and don't have these lines in your application, please add them. They will give you like 25% improvements. And this basically says, I want to cache metadata, I want to cache queries to convert from DQL to SQL, I also want to cache results. And you should always, when fetching things from database, you should always cache that as well. Here I'm using the Doctrine result cache, because nobody cares if your blog post is 1 hour old. Like caching your blog post here for an hour, that's fine. Market may care, but your users, they don't really care, right? So cache things. And this is, of course, a silly example, but imagine you have a complex query that takes a few hundred milliseconds to run. Like, just cache it. And your HTTP calls, cache them, cache them, cache them. HTTP is dead slow. If we are here fighting for milliseconds and you do an HTTP call, that's crazy, man. That takes forever. So say on my website, I have this nice little widgets. I want to show you the latest tweets from everybody. And as you know, Twitter API is dead slow. It takes about 500 milliseconds to get a response from that. So if I want to show this, my website is not super popular. I have 2 requests per second. So if I'm calling this 2 requests per second, here's the big math. I measured for 10 minutes, and it takes a half a second to respond. And with my throughput of 2% per second, the average time I wait for Twitter is 500 milliseconds. This is basically math to say it takes a long time. So if I slap on a nice little cache, here I'm caching it with for just 1 minute. I'm caching the latest tweets, and I'm using the Symfony excellent cache interface to cache this for 1 minute only. And here's the math saying, hey, but if you measure for 10 minutes and you have two requests per minute, then the average call to Twitter will be 4 milliseconds. And like, I'm no mathematician, but I'm fairly sure we would like to see this, right? You're too kind. Also, cache. You can have a local cache. You don't need to be fancy with Redis. You don't need to be fancy with the database cache. Like, say, here's my service to calculate the area of a circle. And every time you're calling this, I calculate pi. Like, why should I do this all over? Pi won't change, right? So I can just put this in a local cache, and if I don't have the local cache, I calculate it, and then every next time I call it, I'll use this. This will also run less code. This will also be quicker. And as web developers, our responsibility is to respond quickly, right? So if someone asks you, hey, can you send an email? The only thing we need to do is validate the email, then we just say, okay, and we postpone the actual sending to later. We put that in a queue somewhere. And then the queue, of course, will prepare the HTML, it will contact our email service, etc. So we only need to validate the input, and then just say, okay, everything is fine, and then postpone the work to later. Cool. I'm moving forward to doctrine. This is me rendering a form saying, here are all my users registered last year. Do you see any issues with this form? It's me trying to be a bit tricky because there's a lot of issues with this form. First up, I'm asking for the users for exactly a year ago. So if the database cannot cache this properly, so they gotta be nice to my database saying, hey, what if I have a year ago and I just clear the seconds properly? So if I call this over and over, the database can actually have a chance to cache the results. Also, when querying this, you can see here I'm fetching, the query takes 200 milliseconds to execute. And what I want to do, I want to make sure I have a nice little index on this table. You see here I have 300 users in my database. It takes forever. So if I slap on an index on this created at, it takes less than a millisecond. So what I did, I sacrificed a little bit of hard disk to get a lot of CPU performance. So every time you use where, make sure you have an index on what you're wearing from. Okay, back to this form then. I have an index, this renders quickly. What else can I improve? I didn't hear the people at the back, but I assume you said, when getting all the users now, I'm asking the database, hey, give me the last 100 users, and I get the users, and I get the rows, and I transfer them to user objects, and then I use the one field on that user object. And hydration is so expensive to create a object from a file. That's so expensive. So what if we skip all this? We can just ask the database what we really want. Instead of give me the full user row, we just say, hey, give me the ID and the email. And don't create an object, give me just an array back, and then I can print this like this. It's a bit more code, and you need to know what you're doing, but this is way more performance, and will save memory massively. Another thing, if you're working with Doctrine or any other library to fetch things from the database, you will have the n+1 problem. Like guaranteed you will have the n+1 problem. And here I have a web shop which have a country, and I ask the database, give me the web shop, and then for the web shop I iterate all the products. So this will create one query for the web shop, and then one query for each product I'm iterating over. So if I have 100 products, there will be 101 queries, which is of course not good. So what you could do, you could be smart about it, you could join in the products already, to use basically saying, give me the web shop and all the products. Or you can be even smarter how you're doing queries. You can just say, hey, give me all the products and join in the web shop. So when you're writing queries, in your local environment, you have 4 products and 1 web shop, so you don't really care, you don't see the performance issues. But in production, you have thousands of products, and this will be an issue. So you need to be aware and thinking about these things when you're actually coding in your local environment. I also want to say, for you PHP developers who raised your hand earlier, your default index PHP file is good but not great. You should have a look at some improvements. There's a link here to the website that actually explains what it's doing. One thing is simple, say, your PHP file will not change in production. That is something you can tell the PHP runtime so they don't check if the files has been updated or not. And you also have the correct size of cache for real path on an op cache. So take a photo of this or go to this link and then we'll explain more. And please, because this is set once and forget, right? And the same thing with front end. Like there is a bunch of things you can do in front end, but the idea is to run less code and send less code to the browser. And I wrote a small list here. I'll share the slide, but here are some easy tips. If you didn't know, now you know, please do them all. So, you all know about the 3 rules how to improve performance. However, there's actually a 4th one. And this shows the difference between being fast and feeling fast. Like, 10 years ago, if you logged into PayPal, you saw this. It's just spinning forever, right? So what happened was PayPal has a very slow backend. So every time you logged in, like you were just waiting. So PayPal, the smart people at PayPal, made this a feature. They're like, no, 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 it takes a lot of time because we logging you in securely. So like they made it a feature, and I'm fine waiting if I know my money is safe and secure, right? A similar thing is with, I think it was Facebook started this. This is from Slack, the skeleton loader. Adding this makes the website feel faster. It won't be faster, but it will feel faster, and your users will be more happy. So if you find something I said interesting and you want to try, please, 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 please profile your applications before to see where are we now, apply the fix, and then see profile application after to see if it makes sense. Because I'm guilty of this so many times that I just think it's faster, but it really, really isn't. So profile applications so you actually know. And I want to show you one profile. I want to show you, there's a bunch of profilers. There's Tideways, there is HFProf if you're an old person, and there is also Blackfire. And this is Blackfire, and this shows an application of mine. Can some of you tell me why this application is slow? I'll give you a hint. It's class loading. Or loading files, loading classes takes forever in PHP. Composer makes it easier. PHP 7 have made it a lot better, but it takes forever. And I want to show you this, how it is. I borrowed this slide from Andrew Carter, and this is one of the best slides I've ever seen. So imagine the HTTP pipeline as a restaurant. So you have your client, like the customer, you have a server, the restaurant, and the request is of course the order, and the response is of course the food coming, and the one who makes the food is the chef, and the one who runs around facilitating this is the HP daemon. All right? The HP pipeline as a restaurant. So how it goes in this restaurant, the client comes into the restaurant, the waitress takes the order, the waitress somehow creates a chef, the chef makes the food, the waitress delivers the food to the customer, and then the waitress brutally murders the chef. Like, this is insane, right? If we were a management consultant and came to this restaurant, what would we suggest? Maybe don't kill the chef all the time. Like, that would be so much, but why are we doing this in PHP? It doesn't make any sense. So you should keep your application alive between requests. And if you have a semi-modern application, you're hopefully using the Symfony runtime component. The runtime component can decouple your application from the actual where you're running it, right? So if you don't write to disk, if you don't use superglobals, and if you make sure to clean up your state, you can easily port your application between different runtimes. Say you want to try out Roadrunner, you want to try out Swool, or maybe you want to try out the new cool Frank in PHP. So make sure you don't run to disk, make sure you don't use superglobals, make sure you don't run state, and you can easily try all these cool things around. And of course, PHP is not built for this kind of witchery, so you have memory leaks. So you need to make sure to clean up your state. Doctrine and Monologue are often very guilty of this. But if you clean up your state, you can run this perfectly. And maybe if you're still scared about memory leaks, kill your applications every hundreds requests. So you won't just explode your service, you just restart now and then. So what I want to say, frameworks are not slow. It is you who decides what you include in your application, and you decide how much lines of code you want to execute to deliver your business value. So you take the responsibility of what's slow and what's not slow. And if you follow these advice, if you follow these principles, you can make your application run quick. In fact, if you want to go crazy, and because it's fun, right, you can even go this. And of course you say, oh, Tobias, is this true? Oh, Tobias, have you tested this in production? Yes, yes I have. Thank you very much for listening to my talk.